Things don't look good for Boeing at the minute. A second whistleblower has come out to state that they are using subpar parts and they are not following guidelines whatsoever to build their planes. And shortly after this whistleblower comes out, he is found dead. And that is the second dead whistleblower against Boeing in 2 months. A second Boeing whistleblower dies short of a short illness. Joshua Dean, 45, formerly quality auditor at Boeing supplier Spirit Aerosystems, alleged gross misconduct and quality management. Joshua Dean, a Boeing whistleblower who warned of manufacturing defects in the plane maker's 737 MAX, has died of a short illness. And he was the second Boeing whistleblower to die this year. Dean, who was 45 at the time, a former quality auditor at Boeing supplier Spirit Aerosystems, filed a complaint with the Federal Aviation Administration alleging serious gross misconduct by a senior quality manager of the 737 production line at Spirit. Now, in case you missed the first kind of incident, let's say, here is what happened with the first whistleblower, who he was, what he blew the whistle about, and what happened to him. Take a look at this.
A Boeing flight from Alaska Airlines as a Boeing 737 MAX 9 plane door blew out mid-air, which forced an emergency landing and passengers to start suing. So this was the footage that absolutely went everywhere regarding this blowout. Take a look at this.
No one seated there. There was thankfully no one seated near the window. Yeah, they just said. I sit there, I thought you were Take it back. Yeah, I thought we were too.
Absolutely horrifying scenes as mid-air, a door flies off the hinges, just leaving a gaping hole in the side of the plane, causing absolute mayhem mid-air. And, you know, this whole thing was apparently supposed to be, you know, it was completely avoidable. And then, you know, the controversies piled up with more and more issues being found on Boeing planes after investigations and things like this. But an ex-Boeing executive, MAX airplane is definitely not safe. That was the quoted words from this News Nation article. So we're going to take a little look at this as well, because it really shines a lot of light on, you know, executives, ex-executives at Boeing, you know, saying this is what's happening, this is not okay, and it was completely avoidable. Take a look at this, because it shines so much light on a very dire situation.
Passengers are still wary of flying on the Boeing 737 MAX 9 airliners after a panel blew out on an Alaska Airlines plane in the middle of a flight last month, forcing an emergency landing. Fortunately, there were no major injuries, but air safety advocates say this could have been so much worse. As airlines continue to utilize the MAX 9s, what needs to be done to ensure safety? For that, we are joined by Ed Pearson, a former Boeing senior manager and executive director of the Foundation for Aviation Safety, and Mark Lindquist, attorney for passengers who were on that flight who are now suing Alaska Air and Boeing. Gentlemen, appreciate you both being here. And Ed, I want to start with you. You are a former Boeing manager. You say you will not fly on this plane. You wouldn't recommend it. Why is that?
Well, thanks for having me. And the reason I wouldn't fly this plane is, unfortunately, I was in the factory and I watched how it was built. And even though they're tremendous employees in the factory, the pressure that they were under to get airplanes out the door just led to tons of mistakes. And we've seen a lot of issues with the airplane in service, not just the Alaska accident. So those are the reasons that I can't advise anybody to fly that plane right now.
For how many years have you noticed these sorts of mistakes? And do you believe that these mistakes could be life-threatening?
Obviously, that's alarming scenes in itself, when you've got an ex-executive of Boeing saying he would not, absolutely not, fly a MAX airplane. That should tell you everything that you need to know.
I definitely think these mistakes can be life-threatening. And for me, I saw these mistakes occurring back in 2017. We started having engines delivered late to the factory, and that led to a cascading effect. And quite honestly, for the last 5 years, we've really seen no improvement or very little improvement at all. They continue to talk about, the number of planes they're going to produce every month. They continue to have employees work ridiculously long hours. They don't have the training, adequate training. There's lots of issues, and unfortunately, they just, changed the lipstick on the pig, and they didn't really get to the root causes of any of these issues.
Ed, what went through your mind when you heard that this happened and saw the video, saw that gaping hole?
Well, I vividly remember it because I was sitting at a basketball game with a friend of mine who works with me, and he's an aerospace engineer, and we just heard the news at the same time, and we both thought, "Oh my God, this must have been so traumatic for the passengers and the crew." In the military, we call those kinds of things explosive decompression because it happens suddenly and violently. I don't know where they came up with the term rapid decompression, but we use that phrase to describe something that took, a depressurization event that occurs over time. And, we were just all thankful that nobody died. I mean, that was, had to have been terrifying. And, the crew obviously did a great job, but they never should have faced that situation.
Yeah. Speaking of this, Mark, let's turn to you here. How many passengers are currently involved in this lawsuit, and how have they described the experience and the aftermath from this?
Well, I represent 25 passengers, and a variety of individuals had a variety of reactions and injuries, everything from hearing damage to anxiety to sleeplessness to, of course, fear of flying. PTSD. Different people reacted differently, but I think a common theme here is most people thought that plane was going down. If you're sitting on a plane and suddenly there's a gaping hole in the fuselage and air masks are dropping, air's rushing around you, you're depressurizing rapidly. In the movies, that plane is going down, and that's what a lot of my clients and other passengers thought. They thought they might be sending, for example, their last text messages ever.
I think it's hard for us to understand just how loud, how violent this was. I know that there were reports of a woman with a little boy, and the shirt was ripped off of his back with the force here. Mark, from the research you've done on this incident, how much worse could this have been?
Oh, if this plane was basically a ticking time bomb, if the plane had depressurized at a higher altitude, such as cruising altitude, it would have been catastrophic. In a matter of seconds, the oxygen is sucked out of the plane. Hypoxia sets in. Your pilot easily could lose consciousness. The structural damage to the plane might be irredeemable. Chances are everybody dies, and we're having a whole different conversation.
Thankfully, it never got that far, but truly to know that it could have reached that far, utterly horrific. Now, a bit off topic, but I spoke to my dad. My dad, for anyone that doesn't know, is an aircraft engineer at British Airways, and I was talking to him about this situation when it first happened back in January, and he was like, in my entire career, he's been at British Airways since he was 17, he's now 52, so however long that is, or 16 he's been there since, but regardless, he was like, in his entire career, he's never known anything like this to ever happen. And, he's even said that there's been issues with Boeing, backlogged issues where even the airlines are feeling the knock-on effect, like British Airways and other airlines that they all use Boeing. So, they're feeling the knock-on effects, and the pressure is building on Boeing because these airlines are requiring these parts, so the pressure is piling onto the airline, which is then they're piling the pressure onto Boeing, and then the Boeing are piling the pressure onto their workforce to pump these out the door. It's a domino effect, to be fair. But the entire situation got even more insane when a Boeing whistleblower, John Barnett, was found dead in the US. Now, John Barnett came out to kind of expose Boeing for, Boeing at the time were like, on the surface, they were like, everything's fine. Yes, this was an issue, we're looking into it, but John came out and he was like, no, things are not fine. There are structural issues. You are cutting corners to try and maximize income and try and get stuff out the door. John Barnett, he worked for Boeing for more than 30 years before retiring in 2017. And in the days before his death, he had been given evidence in a whistleblower lawsuit against the company. Boeing said they were saddened to hear of Mr. Barnett's passing. The Charleston County coroner confirmed that his death to the BBC on Monday. It said that the 62-year-old man had died from, quote, self-inflicted wound on the 9th of March, and the police were investigating. Mr. Barnett had worked for the US plane giant for more than 3 decades until his retirement in 2017 on health grounds. From 2010, he was employed as a quality manager at the North Charleston plant, and the facility builds the 787 Dreamliner. and a state-of-the-art airliner mainly on long-haul routes. And in 2019, Mr. Barnett told the BBC that under-pressure workers had been deliberately fitting substandard parts to aircraft on the production line. So you can see where the corner cutting was taken part because of the severe pressure that they were under. He also said that he had uncovered serious problems with the oxygen systems, which could mean 1 in 4 breathing masks would not work in an emergency. So we saw there was a severe emergency back in January. 1 in 4 of those masks, so you've got to think a row of seats is about 4, maybe 3. So let's say for argument's sake an easy math, there's 4. You've got 2 sets of rows of seats at 4 passengers each. At least one person per row doesn't have a functional air mask, which is horrific because in that kind of situation, that could be the difference between life and death. He said soon after starting work in South Carolina, he had become concerned that the push to get new aircraft built meant the assembly process was rushed and safety was compromised, something the company denied. He later told the BBC that workers failed to follow procedures intended to track components through the factory, allowing defective components to go missing. He said that in some cases, substandard parts had even been removed from scrap bins and fitted to planes that were being built to prevent delays in the production line. People were literally, because of severe pressure, getting stuff out of the scrap bin, fitting it onto the parts just to get it pumped out the door, to get it along the production line. He also claimed that tests on emergency oxygen systems due to be fitted to the 787 showed failure rate of 25%, meaning that 1 in 4 could fail to deploy in a real-life emergency. Mr. Barnett said that he had alerted managers to his concerns, but no action had been taken. Bear in mind, this was back in 2019 that he told the BBC, but back in 2010, he became the quality manager. So from 2010 until present day, these issues have been there. So they've been there for over a decade, almost a decade and a half, and nothing's been done about it. Boeing denied the assertions. However, in 2017, review by the US regulator, the Federal Aviation Administration, did uphold some of Mr. Barnett's concerns. So he was backed by this administration, the FAA. It established that the location of at least 53 non-conforming parts in the factory was unknown and that they were considered lost. Boeing was ordered to take remedial action. On the oxygen cylinders used issue, the company said that in 2017 it had identified some oxygen bottles received from the supplier were not deploying properly, but it denied that any of them were actually fitted on the aircraft. What a shock. After retiring, he embarks on a long-running legal action against the company. Anyway, it goes on like that. So you can see some of the hugely glaring issues that were raised by John Barnett back in 2019 until present day. Now, this whole thing with his death is, incredibly sad, becomes even more scrutinized or kind of under the microscope when you look at this letter that was sent by John to one of his close friends. So a week before his death, Boeing whistleblower John Barnett told a friend, "No, I ain't scared, but if anything happens to me, it's not suicide." I know that he did not commit, well, the friend went on to say, "I know he did not commit suicide," said Jennifer, a friend of Barnett's. "There's no way." The first amended complaint filed to the United States Department of Labor, Officer of Administrative Law Judges, court case John against the Boeing Company in South Carolina, heard the subject of depositions. During this, former Boeing quality control manager, now whistleblower, is a plaintiff, and plaintiff in the case died of a gunshot wound to the head. So, long story short, John comes out to the BBC. He's got this long-running legal case, and he whistleblows. He blows the whistle on all of these issues. Back in January, the issues occur. John's like, "Told you so." And then he's told days before he blew the whistle to his friends, "If I die, I did not commit suicide, just know that." And then days later, he's found dead. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Here's a little video though that was found, and it sheds a lot of light on the entire situation.
Just when you thought flights this year couldn't get any crazier, a former Boeing employee who was giving evidence in a whistleblower lawsuit against the company was found dead yesterday from a self-inflicted wound. You see, John Barnett had worked as a quality manager for Boeing for 32 years, but after he retired in 2017, he embarked on long-running legal action against the company, accusing them of many shocking things, but just some include cutting corners and rushing the construction of their planes, and deliberately fitting substandard parts that compromised safety. And if you've been watching my channel at all this year, you know that there are no shortages of faulty Boeing planes right now. Al Jazeera even made a documentary in 2014 where they got a Boeing employee to go undercover and ask his colleagues if they would fly on the planes that they were building. And out of 15 people, 10 said no. A lot of people don't realize that Boeing is not just an airplane manufacturer. They also sell satellites, rockets, and even weapons like missiles and military aircraft worldwide. They are the 4th largest defense contractor in the world, and they are the single largest exporter in the entire USA by dollar value. Protesters even tried to block Boeing facilities supplying weapons to Israel in November. Anyway, tangent aside, John accused the company of denigrating his character and hampering his career because of the issues he pointed out. And then, just last week, he gave a formal deposition in which he was questioned by Boeing's lawyers, and he had been due to undergo further questioning on Saturday. But when he didn't turn up, inquiries were made and he was subsequently found dead in his truck in his hotel car park. Boeing commented, saying that it was saddened to hear of Mr. Barnett's passing.
There you go. I mean, that literally sums it up in an absolute nutshell, but you can see how deep this whole thing runs. And this was an interview that John made shortly before his passing.
It's not a 737 problem, it's a Boeing problem. When I first started working at Charleston, I was in charge with pushing back defects to our suppliers. I'd take a group of inspectors and actually go to the supplier and inspect their product before they sent it in. Well, I'd taken a team of 4 inspectors to Spirit Aerosystems to inspect the 41 section before they sent it to Charleston. And we found 300 defects. Some of them were significant that needed engineering intervention. When I returned to Charleston, my senior manager told me that we had found too many defects and he was going to take the next trip. So the next trip he went on, he took 2 of my inspectors. And when they got back, they were given accolades for only finding 50 defects. So I pulled that inspector aside and I said, did Spirit really clean up their act that quick? That don't sound right. And she was mad. She said, no. Said the 2 inspectors were given 2 hours to inspect the whole 41 section and they were kicked off the airplane.
It's utterly horrific, you know, the whole situation. And under, you know, severe scrutiny, obviously, you've got planes going horrifically wrong that could cause life-threatening issues, wheels falling off the plane, doors being ripped off its hinges mid-air. And then you've got a whistleblower found dead, who's kind of, you know, scrutinized your company, brought you into question and is like, look, things are not okay. Well, how did the leadership manage that situation? How did the CEO of Boeing and top line managers deal with the situation? Well, they do what all great managers do. They resign. They literally handed in their notice, and by the end of the year, they will be stepping down from their roles at Boeing and leaving. What? No. What the hell, man? Look, this is the interview that they did with CNBC. It's blood boiling.
Why now? And was this completely your decision?
Yeah, first of all, 100%. Why now? I've entered my 5th year. At the end of this year, I'll be close to 68 years old. I've always said to the board, and the board has been very prepared, I would give them plenty of notice so that they could understand and plan succession in regular order. And that's what this is about. It's me giving them notice that at the end of this year, I plan to retire. And then
because I can't handle the heat that is coming right now with my planes being absolutely tit-shaped and my staff being so pressured that they are using scraps from a bin to fit on their planes, and also the fact that it's looming over my head that someone who spoke out about my company mysteriously wound up dead. That's why I'm leaving. But no, I'm going to sugarcoat it with, I'm giving plenty of notice because my time has come. No, you can't handle the heat.
And then them taking the actions that they've taken. I'm actually very proud of the way the board has handled everything. Very deliberate. The move with Larry, in my view, very deliberate. The entry of Steve as our new chairman, very deliberate. all very qualified and great decisions.
If you're going to be leaving, some will say, why not just leave now? Why wait until the end of the year?
We have another mountain to climb. Let's not avoid what happened with Alaska Air. Let's not avoid the call for action. Let's not avoid the changes that we have to make in our factory. Let's not avoid the need to slow down a bit and let the supply chain catch up. We got to get at that, just like we got at the rest. And we will get through that. We will get through that. And I've committed myself to the board to do exactly that.
So, as you can see from that, there are some striking similarities between the two. You've obviously got the first whistleblower who came out, basically just completely was like, look, the production's awful. They're using subpar parts that shouldn't even be allowed to use. We're getting parts out of the trash cans, and we're bunging them on planes to meet production lines and to meet deadlines. And then the second whistleblower comes out and he says pretty much the same thing, and he's then found dead as well. In 2018 and 19, two 737 MAX planes were involved in fatal crashes which killed 346 people. Dean was fired by Spirit last year and filed a complaint with the Department of Labour alleging that his termination was in retaliation for raising safety concerns. So he was sacked, essentially, for raising safety concerns because he was concerned about the way things were going, and Boeing can't have that, so they got a shot of him. According to the Seattle Times, Dean was hospitalized after having trouble breathing and was intubated and developed pneumonia and a serious infection before dying 2 weeks later. So absolutely horrific. Unfortunately, it's so unfortunate that was to happen. I found a video from The Hill, and it goes by the title, Another Boeing Whistleblower Dies, Joshua Dean, 44, Second Dead in 2 months. And they go into some real detail and ask some very good questions about this whole situation. Take a little listen to this.
A Boeing whistleblower who alleged Spirit leadership had ignored manufacturing defects on the 737 MAX has suddenly died. This is the second Boeing whistleblower to have died in the last 2 months as the company has come under increased scrutiny. The Seattle Times first reported that Joshua Dean, a quality auditor at supplier Spirit Aerosystems, died Tuesday at just 45 years old from a fast-spreading infection. Dean had previously filed a complaint with the Federal Aviation Administration alleging there was, quote, serious and gross misconduct by senior quality management of the 737 production line.
Dean was later.
Now, this was very strikingly similar to the alleged claims of the first whistleblower who said very similar things, just across the board. Not just about the 737s, but across the board. And well, just listen on. The similarities don't end there.
Laid off last year and filed a complaint with the Department of Labor alleging that his termination was retaliation for raising concerns about the company's manufacturing plant. The news comes as journalist and activist Cory Doctorow reports that in a non-union shop in Charleston, South Carolina, where Boeing 787 Dreamliner is manufactured, there's a cage full of defective parts that have been pulled from production because they are not airworthy. Doctorow reports that hundreds of those parts were secretly pulled from that cage and installed on operating aircraft.
Exactly what was said by the initial whistleblower. Exactly to the T. Parts were binned, and they were told to be binned by higher-ups and regulated bodies because they were subpar and they were not allowed to be used. But those parts just got pulled out of bins and smacked on the planes so that the workers can meet production deadlines.
Whistleblower type person, frustrated former employee. Obviously, losing your job is a difficult experience that can exacerbate your, bad health outcomes, something like that. So maybe it's just a coincidence, but obviously we talked about the
John
mysterious
Barnett.
to many people circumstances of the death of the other whistleblower who believed to have killed himself.
Now, that is very true. So just kind of to jump in there, the stress of losing your job and the stress of everything that's going on, and maybe even the stuff that you know about, all right, can take a detrimental toll on your health. And this could just be a coincidence. But when you line it up with everything else that's happened, the first whistleblower who died mysteriously, or by supposedly killing himself, and then you add in this after he's blown the whistle about Boeing again, is it such a coincidence? it's really difficult to say.
Yes. So, and this is what Cory Doctorow was writing about, and I strongly encourage people to read this entire article. So, the allegation here is that there was a cage of parts that had been marked as defective. When parts are pulled from a plane and put into this cage, they're permanently marked so that there can be absolutely no confusion, and they will not be reintegrated into airline craft.
Shouldn't they just throw those away?
Well, that's a really good question. What Cory runs through in this piece is how the culture of Boeing shifted radically when it merged with McDonnell Douglas in the late 90s. Douglas was known for its culture at that aviation firm of being extremely driven by pure financial motives, whereas Boeing had historically been known for having really high quality engineers and making really high quality planes. McDonnell Douglas ownership was very frustrated with this, and apparently we're calling all of these very knowledgeable and capable engineers, hyper talented a-holes or something like that, and wanted to get rid of them, and was frustrated by the fact that they kept gumming up their ability to simply use prioritize the profit motive over safety or quality. Okay, cut to that. That's the circumstances here. Cut to now we have this big cage of parts that are supposed to be offloaded forever. One of the things that the new Boeing was managed to do is to convince the government that it should do its own quality inspections, not have it outsourced to the FAA.
Now, this is where things get messy, because if you have a company like Boeing, who are strictly about the profits over safety regulations, as we've seen, if you get them to mark their own homework and label their own parts as safe or not safe, you are going to just have instances like this where you just slap old parts in a plane and send it on its way to meet manufacturing deadlines. And no, absolutely not. It should not be the case. It should always be outsourced to the FAA, because they will not be biased towards the parts, and they will absolutely categorically say if something is safe or not.
At that point, you're basically in charge of reviewing your own, checking your own work, which an institution like the new culture of Boeing, in the new culture of Boeing, is obviously going to lead to people cheating. Now, here's where they messed up. The last whistleblower, the one who's alleged to have killed himself, John Barnett, who is nicknamed, apparently was Swampy, and he's referred to as Swampy throughout Cory's piece, was one of the people who was assigned to do this checking. And he was not corrupt. He was part of the Boeing old guard. So when he was raising red flags about these kinds of things, there was this enormous amount of pushback. He was fired, and cut to now we know that he's being alleged to have killed himself in the car. But one of the discoveries was that the parts that were discarded and had big permanent red marks on them ended up integrated into God knows how many planes that are currently in the sky right now. That is what's going on at Boeing. This is a huge bombshell realization.
And safety and profits should not necessarily be in tension if the company is not shielded from liability protection or in a purely market operating system. If the product, the plane, whatever is being delivered, is there's an incentive to have it be nicer, safer, better, more efficient, so that you want to fly on those planes, or the airlines want to buy those planes or use those planes, all of that stuff. There's a market incentive. But if there's artificial intervention that prevents an airline or the manufacturer of the airplane that shields them from the harms associated with having sold people a defective product, then you end up, which is exactly what happens in the airline industry. We're describing the total capture by people in a regulatory sense, in an accountability sense. Then you get distorted incentives, and you get, well, we can continue making defective planes, and we're not going to suffer any consequence from it, because what can anyone do about it?
Well, corporate corruption and the corruption of our...
And that's exactly... I'm going to stop this video here. If you want to check out the full video, go over to the Hills YouTube channel. But that's exactly the issue, right? We're in a position here where eventually airliners, British Airways, TUI, American Airlines, Alaska Airlines, whoever else who buy from Boeing, are just going to stop, because it's not a good look for their company if their planes are going down in the masses, all right? Or they've got defects, or they've got problems. But the issue there is, it's all well and good saying just don't buy from Boeing, but who else do you go and buy from? It's not like there's a huge market of plane manufacturers out there, and who can produce the planes on the quantity and the scale that Boeing can. So companies are between a rock and a hard place. Boeing are going to sell regardless of whether their planes are safe or not. It's just about how many they can churn out of the door. Now, that's just my take on it. Don't forget that the Boeing CEO and kind of higher up management are going to be stepping down at the end of this calendar year. So, you know, they're clearly like they basically like they're off. They're like out of there because, I mean, it would look very suspicious if they were to just leave after the first Boeing whistleblower died. That looks really suspicious. So of course they waited until the end of the year, because then it's less conspicuous. It's less like conspiracy. It's less like, well, there's the clear evidence. If they're leaving, then they had something to do with it. But the issue therein lies again with what is going on, and why are these people who are trying to stop this corruption being silenced permanently? You know, it's utterly horrific, and this is just going to force other people who know the bad things that are going on into silence, and that causes then more issues because Boeing can just get away with it without any backlash whatsoever. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What a messed up situation this entire thing is. I hope that something happens with it. I hope that something bigger than just whistleblowers steps in and intervenes. But we'll have to wait and see on that one. But let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. While you're down there, be sure to jump scare the hell out of that like button. Subscribe if you're new. Tick my little bell so you get notified whenever we upload. We upload every day at 7 PM UK time on this very channel. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed. I cannot wait to see you in the next one. And I'll speak to you later. Peace.